One of my very favorite American commentators is the one and only Niko House. Niko is in the house again tonight on the mother of all talk shows. Niko, I've got to tell you, I'm beginning to wonder if everybody in the American presidential election is mad. I've just watched the wife of Tim Walz asking all Americans to turn the page, turn the page. She repeated it 10 times, turn the page, to accentuate Kamala Harris's plea to turn the page on the Trump years. I had earlier watched Tim Walz and thought he was straight out of Nurse Ratchet's care in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I've been watching the lunacy of Kamala Harris. And then I heard it's a Freudian slip, Joe Trump, Donald Biden. No, Donald Trump. I heard him, I watched him say that dogs and cats in America are at risk from aliens, he called them. He meant refugees from Haiti, which has been ruined by the United States and France before it for hundreds of years. So I'm looking for some sanity. Can you give me any?
Yeah, I can give you some. I'm not sure you're going to find it in this presidential election. Unfortunately, Kamala saying turn the page on the Trump years completely ignores and negates the fact that America did turn the page. They're on a different book. She is part of the book. And still Trump has a chance to win and probably will win, because when they turned the page, they realized this chapter was just as trash as the last chapter, if not worse. I mean, they turned the page from, a guy who drone striked and sent out mean tweets. And, it was problematic in the situation with Israel and Palestine as well. But when they turned that page, they ended up on a chapter where they're almost in World War III, where there's a genocide in Gaza, where, I know you're doing a poll right now, whether it be a war between Russia and NATO, but there's already a war between Russia and NATO. There is no more war between Russia and NATO. The outcome is World War III. That's where we're at right now. So while we're dealing with the realities of the consequences of our duopoly, because that's really the only way you can describe it, we're just dealing with consequences of the duopoly, and no matter who wins, those consequences just change. But there will still be no progress, in my opinion, right now. We have to accept that we're dealing with morons, but the possibility of a World War III before Kamala takes over is real, because if she does win in November, they have the ability to invoke the 25th Amendment, or Joe Biden himself can choose to step down, which means you get somebody who is even more controllable than Joe Biden in power, which would be Kamala Harris. And then we could potentially have to deal with her for 3 months and then 4 years and then potentially another 4 years, George. So we're dealing with some silly people, but the consequences are very, very real.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if these people were just passing drunks or passing lunatics, we wouldn't have to worry about them. But they have their finger on the trigger, including the nuclear trigger. And I've been watching the Harris campaign. I've been watching her salivate over the possibility that the United States will have the most lethal, that's how she accentuated it, the most lethal fighting force on the planet. Which isn't, of course, true, especially if you put all of America's selected enemies together, as they have successfully pushed them together. Actually, there are plenty of people who would be ready to contest that title. And the rest of us will be incinerated as a result.
Yeah, no, that's 100% true. I mean, Kamala was endorsed by Dick Cheney. This man there's not been a time where he's held an official position in any administration, George, in my lifetime, where he was not the architect of a major war. He was the architect of, obviously, Afghanistan and Iraq, but a lot of people from my generation don't even know he was the architect behind the operation in Panama. And so Kamala it has been so hawkish in her rhetoric that Dick Cheney looked at Trump and looked at Kamala and said, yep, that's my girl. That should scare everybody. But it also should give us some insight into just how hawkish she would be. And you're absolutely right. There's no reason to believe right now that America has the most powerful fighting force. First of all, morale is down in the military. So just from a manpower, labor power, and patriotic perspective, we don't have it. Weapons-wise, we like to believe that we have the best weapons, but Putin has already been very clear. He hasn't even gotten into his bag yet, George. He's using old weapons to beat down a Ukraine that's being funded by the entire Western world. With, once again, old weapons, while still having enough of his old weapons left on the side to give to other countries. And if China just decides one day to stop making our weapons, I don't know how we're supposed to fight a war, because they're going to be one of the people that are joining Russia. So I'm not really sure where they get this idea that America and NATO can actually continue to have this worldwide hegemonic dominance whenever nothing in the last 4 to maybe 8 years has shown us that. Look at what happened in Africa, whether it be Niger, whether it be Burkina Faso or any other country that have liberated themselves. They can't even keep themselves straight in Haiti right now. The reason the violence is still ongoing is because the United States is on its 3rd installed administration. And Haitians that they're calling gang members, in other words, they're the people who are almost unorganized. They're organized to some degree, but they're not military trained, but they're fighting back NATO powers and people equipped with NATO weapons and NATO training. So where are they getting this idea that we can challenge Russia and the total dominance of the allies that they've accrued over the last several years? Partially because of how they've treated their allies, but partially because the United States has shown themselves to be nothing short of psychopathic.
Well, of course, the empire is striking back everywhere. The guys in sandals in the Yemen have just landed a ballistic missile, hypersonic missile, that in 12 minutes went from Yemen to destroy an important infrastructural development in Israel, evaded American surveillance in the Red Sea, evaded the surveillance of the Gulf countries over which it flew, evaded the security of Egypt, sailed up the Suez Canal at hypersonic speeds, and then did a dramatic turn to the right and smashed and destroyed an important facility in Tel Aviv without even a bell ringing, even an alarm sounding, never mind anyone sending something up successfully to intercept it. The world's changed now. Guerrilla, irregulars,
George,
asymmetric forces.
Our tax money from, I was saying our tax money to the Iron Dome is being spent well, huh? All that money we done gave already seems to be doing its job.
Exactly. So the tables have turned, Niko. The days when John Bull and then Uncle Sam could go around the world bombarding people and forcing them to do their will, these days are over now. Mm-hmm. That's the big change, isn't it?
It's about time. It's about time. It's about time. And you know what? I always say, as an American, and I believe you probably feel the same way as a Brit, there is a certain level of consequence that we have to accept because to some degree we've benefited, right? We've benefited from this empire. And even though we're part also of oppressed demographics of the empire specifically, at the same time, if you're not willing to challenge the empire, then what comes next, you better be prepared for, and you better be ready to be accountable, because it's one thing to benefit from being part of the empire because you just were born into it, but it's another thing to be complicit in what we've seen regarding Gaza, regarding the way we've seen our African brothers and sisters treated, the way we've seen the empire behave, even in the Caribbean, when we're looking at Haiti or when we're looking at Latin America, where I'm living at right now. You see the damage of the empire and what it has taken to keep the empire afloat when you go visit these places. And what I like is that we're seeing this pivot almost. It's slow, Maybe in the grand scheme of history, it's not that slow, but it seems slow. But if you're paying attention, NATO doesn't have control over the situation anymore. The United States doesn't have control of the situation anymore. What we're seeing seems to be mostly reactionary. I don't even think they have control over Israel anymore, right? So when we're looking at the grand scheme of things, not only are they losing control because of narrative, but like you said, just from an arms perspective, if Yemen can do that to Israel, Israel's supposed to have the greatest intelligence in the world, and that region of the world is their specialty. They didn't know that Yemen had that missile, or better yet, they didn't have the ability to stop it when it came. That is a major story, and it tells us everything we need to know about how things could look going forward. We know what the United States has at play. We know what NATO has at play. They have zero idea what these other countries who have been kind of keeping their hands a little bit closer to the chest have to play. And like Russia said, y'all won't know until you find out. So I really hope that we don't have to find out the hard way, but it's not looking good.
No. Finally, a curveball. Are they really eating the cats and dogs in Springfield, Ohio? Where did he get that story from?
An Ohioan was. Yeah, somebody from Ohio, which actually makes more sense than a Haitian doing it, if I'm being completely honest. I thought it was actually somebody from Ohio or somebody from Florida who was on vacation in Ohio for some odd reason. That's something that either people from either state would do. But no. It wasn't a Haitian, and a lot of people have been trying to figure out a way to push the narrative that Trump put out there. But that just tells you how ridiculous that debate was, because they were both lying out of their teeth. And for those who had a little bit of hope that Trump was going to be better than Kamala and Joe, it's quickly fading. I'm not going to lie.
Jill Stein's doing very well. She's on the ballot in most of the country now, and she's well ahead of Harris in key demographics in swing states amongst Arab Americans, Muslim Americans. In Michigan, I think she's about 35 points ahead of Kamala Harris amongst these two key demographics.
Yeah, in Michigan, she's like at 300 or 400,000 voters in the poll they did, which is kind of crazy when you think about it, because that's just a poll. That's not even how many voters are actually going to vote for her. And it should be said, for those of you who don't know, there's not been a Democrat in this century who's won the election without winning Michigan. And when they do win Michigan, it is always marginal, by less than what Joe Biden lost during the primary whenever the uncommitted voters decided to, with purpose, choose to ignore him and vote uncommitted. So that's a big deal. That's a huge deal. And once again, we have to remember these are the demographics that Democrats have always pandered to, but they've always needed. And so without the demographics on their side anymore, without the narrative on their side anymore, without anybody in genuine power, I'm not talking about Kamala. Kamala doesn't really have power. I'm talking about the Hillarys. I'm talking about the Bidens of old. I'm talking about Bill Clinton, Obama. Without anybody up next and the narrative not on their side, you do have to wonder what comes next. Because I don't see Kamala winning this election. And from that point, it just becomes desperation. And unfortunately,
maybe they'll take us to war in order to avoid the election. Niko House, as always, a very great pleasure to see you in such fighting form.